So, we made it to the final episode of the season, and there's a lot that we really need to go over. From the cool action that we get in the episode, to the very touching reunions of characters, and finally the ending that is setting up for something big to come, most likely in the next season. All that and more will be discussed in this episode. So, hey guys, how is it going? It is your boy, Manga Mandrew, and I'm here to do my breakdown and review for My Hero Academia Vigilantes Season 2, Episode 13. So, before we jump into the actual breakdown review, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel where I make My Hero Academia and related content. So if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe. And without the way, let's dive right into the episode. And to start off, the episode is titled Graduation and Career Path, which takes its name from manga chapter 66, which was initially titled Career Path, but was amended for the volume release. As well as this episode covers material from chapter 57, pages 9 through 19, as well as chapters 58 and 66. And this may be the first time in My Hero Academia's history where chapters adapted to an episode are very much not sequential, as in back to back to back, which makes sense for this season due to the big rearrangement between the Sky Egg arc and the Aizawa flashback arc to his school days. And it also is to allow for the season to end on a very specific line and chapter, which definitely is going to bleed into the next season whenever that comes out. But without the way, let's dive more into the episode proper. And to start off, the episode actually begins with the scene from last episode of Knuckle Duster blowing the roof off the building while shooting off the limbs of number 6 right before the explosion happens and sends him flying. And something that I didn't realize up until now was that the anime actually shows the explosion from outside the building, which is absent from the manga. And this is where we finally get to see the aftermath of him blowing his literal arm off, but we see that he's able to recover like in the manga using bomber cells in conjunction with his overclock quirk that he stole from Knuckle Duster. Well, technically not stolen, but it's very much implied that All For One was the one that did give number 6 the quirk, especially for what we see at the end of the episode. But it's from here where we do very much have, like in the manga, of number 6 monologuing about how he has grown in his admiration of Knuckle Duster and plans on surpassing him as O'Clock. And it's from here where we get the fighting sequence from the manga between Knuckle Duster as well as number 6. And the anime actually slightly extends the action sequence here with a few more added punches between Knuckle Duster and number 6, as well as when they're about to punch each other like in the manga, the anime actually adds another scene of the punches about to collide, which is actually absent from the manga. And how this all happens, and then the explosion is actually heard by Koichi as the building is taken down by their attack. And there's actually one small change between the anime and manga in this scene, as the manga actually includes a scene where Koichi hears the building exploding from a distance, but immediately afterwards, we see Fat Gum asking about that explosion, as well as Monica running in to report on quote-unquote Toshinori's disappearance, believing that he was blown away by All Might's attack, only for him to secretly return back to Naomasa. That is something that is explicitly shown in the manga. However, in the anime, Koichi is the only one that hears the explosion alone, as the other scenes were cut from the anime. And even with that subtraction itself, the anime also adds a scene that is actually present later on in the manga, as well as later on in this actual anime episode, where we see a blood drop, assumedly from this unidentified individual, as more or less to add tension on whether or not he survived or was killed by Knuckle Duster, which, spoilers, towards the end of the episode, we get the reveal that he is very much alive. However, after the OP and the once again title card still being Deus Ex Machina, we cut over to see Captain Celebrity in a hospital surrounded by most of the Naruhata Fest participants. And this is where, very much like in the manga, where we get Captain Celebrity praising Koichi and Koichi being happy about his signed All Might hoodie. However, the anime does add more detail to this scene by having Captain Celebrity be hospitalized in the Naruhata Disaster Medical Center in the anime, instead of it being an unknown hospital in the manga. And now that we're focusing on Captain Celebrity, after that small scene, we get the conversation between Naomasa and Makoto about how if Koichi were to get credit for his heroism during the Sky Egg arc, that he would have to face major consequences, as he would be more than just a random civilian, but a reoccurring vigilante, which would be illegal in the world of My Hero Academia. However, in that moment, we still have Naomasa being thankful for what Koichi did. And what I like about this moment is how there's a very minute change between the anime and manga, where in the anime, Naomasa has a more enthusiastic look on his face in the anime when he's praising Koichi. However, in the manga, his facial expression is a little bit more exhausted, which is also very much needed to contrast how Makoto in this moment is very happy thinking about Koichi, as Naomasa has similar feelings about Koichi as he does towards another individual, which is implied to be All Might. And now I'm not saying that it's romantic, but the parallels are there. But with that in mind, talking about love, what happens afterwards is very amazing, as we hear a random woman running towards the room, which we later will see is Captain Celebrity's wife Pamela, as she hands off her baby to Makoto, as she gives Captain Celebrity these hands for how reckless he was and how he almost died, and made her very sad. And what I like about this scene, about the anime and the manga, is how you're able to truly see how much Pamela loves Captain Celebrity, aka Chris, and that while he is a flawed individual, she still very much loves and cares for him. So much that she flew to Japan after giving birth with a baby. If that's not love, I have no idea what love is. However, this scene is even improved upon in the anime just a little bit by having the comedic sequence of her pounding into Captain Celebrity be a little bit longer, as well as extending the scene by having Pop's step have a little bit more dialogue to Pamela hitting Chris. And just overall, keeping the same emotional tone in the anime as it does in the manga. But after that very great and emotional scene, we immediately cut to 2 weeks later, where we see everyone associated with Captain Celebrity, from the students that supported him that were more delinquent / Yankee individuals, to the Narufest performers, who are all saying goodbye to Captain Celebrity at the airport. As we see that he is very happy to be surrounded by the people that he very much has grown to love and care about, as he also gets surrounded by more news reporters in the anime than we see in the manga. And as Captain Celebrity talks about the important people in his life, he almost puts his foot in his mouth once again, but luckily enough, Makoto is here to clarify that the woman that he was talking about was her, and that it was strictly business. As well as this is the moment where it's revealed that she will actually be studying abroad in America, and also continue to act as Captain Celebrity's manager. And what's very interesting about this entire sequence is a small little change from the manga to the anime, where Makoto reveals that she's going to a college in New York City. The anime makes a small change to it to make it be less obvious as a visual reference to the Avengers Tower in the anime, because you know, to skirt through copyright claims. Please don't let this video be copyrighted. But as we see Captain Celebrity and everyone leaving, the anime also extends this scene of him saying goodbye to everyone by adding Captain Celebrity saying goodbye, which is not in the manga, as well as what's not in the manga is that we get to see everyone looking upon Makoto and Pamela saying goodbye, as well as we get to see them see the plane take off from outside the terminal. All of that was anime original, involving the characters saying goodbye to Captain Celebrity in this moment. Once again, how did they end up on the airport tarmac? The world will never know, but it is a trope and we'll keep on rolling. But it's from here where we're approaching the first half ending of this episode, where we actually get to see Popstep and Koichi returning to Koichi's apartment, and how they're talking about how great Makoto is, and how Koichi begins to ask Pop to praise him more, as the anime makes a few changes in this moment. For starters, the anime adds more detail to the mugs that Koichi is using by having them being All Might themed and branded, as well as the anime during the narration showing more pictures and items on their corkboard, which indicates memories of their time as being heroes, as well as just their general time having fun. And some small things that I want to point out on this corkboard that are new, that are actual scenes that are more off-screen adventures that we don't see in the actual story itself, include Koichi capturing a few unknown villains that we don't see during the story, as well as we do get a few pictures of him, Makoto, and Popstep going on vacation to the beach together. as well as we get to see them adding letters in reference to Popstep getting fan letters on the corkboard as well. So those are a few changes that are here, and if you want to pause it in this moment, you can see even more, especially some photos referencing scenes from the actual season itself, both the first and second season. But those aren't the only changes that we have in this scene as well. There are a few more changes included, which include the anime adding dialogue between Koichi and Popstep under the narration of the events of the Sky Egg incident, as well as the anime changing the narrative to fit into the new timeline, because in the manga, they say that the Sky Egg incident happened during his year as the Crawler, but the anime explicitly says it happened at the end of his first year. And this is due to the rearrangement of arcs in this season, where the Aizawa School Days arc happens more towards the end of Koichi's first year of being the Crawler, while in the anime it happens earlier on and before the Sky Egg, while in the manga it happens after the Sky Egg incident. So yeah, it's those few changes that really just shows the attention to detail that this series has to have, even when it comes to changing the continuity as well as the timeline of events. But now we approach the second half of the episode. But before we get to the second part of the episode, there's one more thing that we have to address, as this segment of the episode ends with Naomasa and Izo having a conversation over who Knuckle Duster was fighting in the ruins of the building, where Izo is questioning what they are fighting, and how the anime actually omits a few lines of dialogue, which includes the exchange between Naomasa and Izo about referring to number 6 as quote-unquote non-human, as well as the anime omits Koichi's narration, which actually foreshadows him incoming in conflict with number 6, and how that is not included in the anime. And how now that we're getting towards the second half of the episode, it actually starts off with something interesting by explicitly showing that it's going to be a 2-year time skip, as we get to see a more experienced Crawler trying to save the day from 2 quote-unquote villains harassing some young girls. And something else that I want to bring up is how between the anime and the manga, when it comes to this narration, the narration is relatively speaking unchanged. However, in the anime, the narration is actually done by President Mike, very much like the narration done in My Hero Academia proper for the most part. And what's also very interesting about this scene is how this scene is actually expanded upon in the anime, as we get to see Koichi being a lot more confident in this fight, as we see that he's actually fighting a little bit more than what we get in the manga, as well as we get to see him avoiding attacks more in the anime than we get in the manga. Also, the anime removes Pop asking Koichi about if she should call anyone regarding these thugs, and how we also get the omission of the thugs breaking out of the ties Koichi tries to put on them, which is very much present in the manga, and instead, in the anime, we just see the thugs brush off his shooty go blam attacks. However, like in the manga, we do have Takabe and Kirihito restraining and recruiting the thugs to their new cafe, which is very much like in the manga, and how in the manga, the remark of one of the thugs' pay, which is around 650 yen, is said by a random civilian in the manga, while in the anime, Koichi and Pop are the ones thinking that that pay is ridiculous. Also, I wanted to interject here because while I was editing this video, I wanted to clarify something at this moment, which is that it's very unclear on whether or not Koichi and Popstep are actually thinking this at this moment, and that it could very much just be the two girls right next to them due to the sound effects of when the dialogue occurs, as well as the voices being more feminine, while Koichi's voice is typically a little bit more masculine.
時給650円って安すぎ。こいちそろそろ時間。今日は午後から面接でしょ。
あ、そっか。さあ、俺たちもう行くね。
So I just wanted to clarify it here. Now, back to the video. And very much like in the manga, we do get a group picture with Koichi, Popstep, and a few reoccurring members of the entire series taking a picture with these girls, as we cut to Koichi having an interview with a trash collection company. And he seems to have done well in the interview, as the episode begins to come to an end with the confirmation that Koichi was able to live out his dream of being a hero for 3 years, and that he's happy to find a job after graduation, as we learn that his senior year of college will be the final year of the Crawler, which makes sense for what the title of this episode is. and how this realization scares Pop Step, which is going to lead into the next arc, which is going to be Pop Step heavy, and how the episode actually ends with the declaration of this being his final season, as we get Koichi's new look, as well as we get an updated look at the corkboard with a few more pictures, as well as a flyer for the new cafe with Kirihito's Cat Cafe put on the corkboard as a new addition. And that would typically be the end of the episode. However, we do get an anime original scene that is added to the post-credit stinger, showing All For One and Dr. Garaki experimenting on number 6 in Dr. Garaki's Jaku Hospital lab, implying that number 6 survived that explosion and the rubble falling upon him, but we have no idea what happened to Knuckle Duster. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode and this season of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. Overall, I thought that this was a solid season. I think that there are probably more highs in this season than in season 1, but the lows in this season are a little bit lower than in season 1. But still, overall, both seasons had very well and very great animation with very few animation mistakes, except maybe one in this episode, which if I can find it, I'll put it up here. But overall, a very, very solid season of just My Hero Academia and anime content in general. And while we don't get the reveal of the next season coming up anytime soon, the fact of the matter is it is going to get another season most likely, especially with the hint of what's happening with Pop Step and Koichi. And when we get this season, either it's going to be 1 or 2 seasons tops, because there's going to be a lot of action and a lot of cool stuff coming up. So be prepared for whenever that comes out. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this episode or video for My Hero Academia Vigilantes. So let me ask you this. How'd you feel about the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And how do you feel about the season as a whole? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!